Okay, so hello everybody and welcome to today's Shaderlight webinar. So today we have myself, I'm Patrick Grant, and we also have Martin Cox, and it's going to be him who takes you through today's Shaderlight demonstration. Okay, so you may or may not be aware, a couple of weeks ago there was the Trimble SketchUp 3D Basecamp, of which we are in attendance. It was a massive success, attended by industry professionals from around the world, as well as some of the most prolific SketchUp users. The feedback that Shaderlight had was absolutely unbelievable. People coming and seeing us all day long and just congratulating us on what we already knew, but that we've got a fantastic product. Okay, so of course we want to keep you in the loop of what's going on. So what we're actually going to do today is we're going to take you through exactly what we showed the attendees of Basecamp. So yeah, really just keeping you in the loop. Just quickly, you'll see up on your screen, just got a little bit of info for you. Of course, if you haven't already, feel free to download the 14-day trial. Standard commercial license is $299. We've got network licensing available for those of you who have offices with multiple SketchUp users. And these are for perpetual licenses as well. And we've got free email support. This is something we're very proud of at Shaderlight, is the way we support our customers and help you in any way we can. Okay, so throughout the webinar, if you've got any questions, send them over using the text chat box again. We'll get those answered as we can. If we don't get back to you today on the live webinar, we've got your email addresses and we'll be in contact very shortly. Well, that's about enough from me. I'll hand you over to Martin and he'll take you through what we showed everybody at 3D Basecamp.
Thanks very much, Patrick. And as always, I'd like to welcome everyone that's joined us on this webinar. It's always great to see so many people. And, you know, we're going to have sort of a good overview of SketchUp and Shaderlight, looking at some of the different features and, you know, really keeping an eye on some of those things like the replace me components and, you know, animations. And we're going to talk about the cloud rendering as well. So as Patrick said, you know, any point all the way through, you know, please use the chat function to ask live questions, and we can certainly, you know, use those as you go through it. It's in the panel sort of on the right-hand side there. So we're going to go through and, you know, have a look through the presentation that we did present at Basecamp. Now, ArcVPS, you know, a little bit of history about us really. You know, we're the company behind Shaderlight. And we've been around for 12 years developing a render engine and hardware. And this was initially for 3D Studio Max, and this is also for Maya as well. And, you know, we wanted to make high quality rendering available to everybody. And we saw SketchUp as this ideal opportunity and this ideal program to help develop this idea. So, you know, we launched Shaderlight for SketchUp in 2010. So, you know, really we've had a great couple of years, and going to Basecamp this year was absolutely fantastic. So, you know, it's a really good sort of feedback from that. And, you know, one of the things that was sort of commented on when we did launch was the SketchUpiness. And this is a word that we really, you know, we've enjoyed using. We want Shaderlight to feel SketchUpy. So, you know, it's just an extension of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And, you know, with the interactivity as well, you know, helping you, the work develop as you go through. And, you know, we'll certainly see this as we actually go through. And the easiest way to obviously show you this is to actually have a look at the, you know, an online demonstration. So, you know, let's make a start on that. So I've got a model here that, you know, we've worked on in-house, and I'm just going to export this to Shaderlight. Now, when you install Shaderlight, your toolbar is fully integrated into SketchUp. And this is one of the really useful things about Shaderlight, is that you have that toolbar inside SketchUp so that any changes you make, you don't have to then re-export. And what I'll do, I'll show you this. So I'm going to start Shaderlight rendering, and we can see that we're now connected to Shaderlight from SketchUp here. So this is my Shaderlight render window. I'm just going to set this so that it's always on top, And if you're using a single screen, this is really useful because now if I click inside SketchUp, it doesn't sort of put Shaderlight behind, so we can sort of keep an eye on what's going on there. And we can really see now, that interactivity while we're sort of moving around and zooming. And, what we've done, we've taken the SketchUp materials and then basically we've rendered them using the Shaderlight materials. So we've got the water in the pool here. We can see it's reflecting that particular wall there. And we have a bump on the surface, which means we actually get the ripples on the surface going on there as well. So it already is enhancing our materials and enhancing the SketchUp model straight away, and I haven't actually done anything with regards to any of our lighting settings or any of those other options there as well. So we can see that if I make a change to our model, so if I just highlight that wall there, we haven't got to do anything. We just see that change automatically, and this is the real purpose behind this. You can imagine this helping your workflow as you can see what's going on. So if I just go back to my initial saved scene view here, so we can see this, rendering away, and it's, finishing. It's just be a minute or so. But what we can do, we can also use in the render window some of the features here. Now, if I just use my mouse here in Shaderlight, I can actually zoom in. And I can also pan round, so zooming in just using the wheel, and panning round just left mouse button there as well, and we're having a look around the render window. And you can do that in Mac as well, so you've got those controls on the Mac version. Now I can also take a snapshot. So that's now finished rendering, and we've got my snapshot here. So the good thing is with the snapshot is that I can actually make a change, and if I just go into my material editor here, and if I select the red that's on this back wall, if I just say, well, actually, I'd like to see what that looks like in a rather vivid green, we can get that update happening. And with the snapshot, we can actually compare the render so we can see which one we prefer. But to be honest, with those automatic updates, you get that pretty quickly anyway. So you could have a number of snapshots. Now, when your render is finished, or even while it's in progress, you can simply just say File, Save As, and you then get the familiar tools. So save it as a JPEG or a bitmap or an HDR, and there's different options to save, but they're all familiar formats. Now, the snapshot, we can do exactly the same with that as well. So just by selecting that snapshot, you can say File, Save As the same. So if you did want the red version, you've got that option there. So I'm just going to go back to my red version. Okay, so what we've done, we've seen how we've taken the SketchUp model and using the SketchUp settings, how we've rendered those as well. So if I look into our shadow settings, now if I change the time of day, in SketchUp we know that changes the sun position, and in Shaderlight we're doing that as well. So we're quite happily working with these shadow settings. Now the thing is, when you're using the shadow settings in SketchUp, the options you've got here, they're basically a single point of light that's moving around to the correct position in the sky. So if I choose early in the morning, we still get the same sort of look of the light as we do in midday. Now I'm going to open up the Shaderlight render settings here, and we can see this is the extent of the settings. So it's nice and simple in here as well. We've got the output resolution, so the size of the render that you want to work with. Now at the moment I'm just on a sort of a widescreen 720 by 405 here, but you can set this up to high definition and some of the familiar formats. But you've also got the width presets here, and they can go up to 16,000 by 16,000. So if you're rendering a billboard, so you've got the controls there. Now the thing is, when you're using your render, while you're setting up your scene, and you'll see as I'm working through today, what I would recommend is keep that smaller. Don't set the quality too high while you're setting up your scene. The higher you set the quality, yes, you get more quality there. The light, the light will be softer, and the edges will be a bit softer, but it will render a little bit slower. But while you're setting it up, I'd recommend just having that sort of midway, and you'll see exactly what's going on. Now, I'm working on an exterior at the moment, and we're going to look at these scene options here as well. Now, the auto updates, that's just simply those updates as I move. Now, if you don't want those, you can actually turn that off. So you can say that you only want it to render on demand. So now it will only render when you click on the camera icon. So now I can move my model around. It's still continuing to render that particular view. So I can carry on working here, and I could sort of paint a wall if I wanted to. So we've turned that off. But I'm going to go back to the auto. Now, the tiled mode, if you're rendering a high resolution render, really in auto mode, it's going to be rendering the whole thing. Whereas tiled mode, it will be rendering it tile by tile, which I would recommend on sort of lower spec machines when you're doing sort of the high quality and high resolution rendering. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my auto mode here. And now have a look in the lighting. So this is what we were talking about with regards to, at the moment we're using the SketchUp Sunlight. So these are my shadow settings here. So if I set that to physical sky, what we'll see is that the model will actually change color. So it gets that more blue look to it as well. Now we're rendering this about 11:30, so it's sort of quite bright point in the day. If I choose early in the morning, we will see that the sun position is going to change, but also the lighting as well. So we're now actually getting a little bit of color to that early morning lighting. Now if I go even earlier, again we'll get that really sort of yellowness to the model, and we actually start seeing the shadows become softer edges as well. So not only are we taking the model and actually changing the color of the sky, we're rendering a correct sun position as well. And rather than, as I mentioned, a single point of light, we actually are creating a sky for these times of day. And what I can do is I can change my background to the lighting environment, and there we go, we can now see our physical sky. So if I rotate my model around here, and there we go, there's the sun in the sky there, so we can actually see that is the size of the light. So that's why we're getting the softer shadows there. And if I change that back to noon, we're going to now see the sky change to a much bluer color, and the sun is directly above. So we'd need to sort of look round at the different sort of underneath the model to be able to see our sun. But you can see that the physical sky already adds that realism to it as well with those different sun positions. So the other lighting options we've got, now one I want to quickly look at is the chalk render. Now if I set my render to chalk render here, it's not the most exciting render initially, and this is something we do get asked on support. And I want to explain why it's doing this ultimately, because people say, well, I've done a chalk render and it doesn't exactly look like the example images. Now the reason for this is when you set chalk render, you can see in the lighting option for chalk render you get shadow range. And this is the range that the shadows will break from edges. Now at the moment it's set to 1 unit. And I know in this model that 1 unit is 1 millimeter. So that's basically why we're not seeing anything here. So if I set that to a meter, so 1000 millimeters, suddenly we see the chalk rendering, really sort of coming into its own there. If I set this to 2.5 meters, we really start getting the spread there. And if I come inside my model here as well, and we can see again with the chalk rendering updates, that's quite happy to work inside as well. Obviously chalk render just replaces all the materials with this matte material, so that's sort of why we're not seeing the windows there. But that's why just a good shape analysis of the model here. Excuse me. So chalk render is a really good way to see the shape of your model, and it sort of takes away just the ability to create a quick model rather than the the style model that a lot of architects will create, but you can get to see that before you still create one of those if you want to. Okay, now some of the other lighting options we've got in here. Now we've got a preset lighting options as well. Now this preset lighting options, these are what's called lighting environments, and these are created from HDR images. Now that stands for high dynamic range, and these images are 360-degree lighting environments. So they contain basically a photo, and again, if I spin my model around here, we can actually see that we're inside of this environment. But what's special about the HDR, rather than using something like a JPEG, is the range of light information that it can actually contain. A JPEG from black to white is only 256 stages, whereas an HDR is well over a million. So the light can actually collect information from where the sun is. So in the scene here, we can see we've got a very soft shadow on this edge here, and that's coming from the sun in this scene. And we can actually see behind the tree there that the sun on the particular day that this image was taken was very hazy, sort of behind a layer of thin cloud. So that's why we're getting the very soft edge shadows there. Now I can change this to London morning as well, and this London morning environment, we'll see where the 360-degree environment will change. This was taken about 6 o'clock in the morning, and this was right by Tower Bridge and the Thames. So the option that we've got there, and we can really see there the much harder edge shadows. And what I can do is, if I spin that round, there's the light coming from behind Tower Bridge. Now if I darken this background, the HDR will actually lower the exposure, and we can even see the sun above there on Tower Bridge. So this is what I'm saying, that even though we're lowering the brightness, it's lowering the actual exposure of the HDR. So we've got that option there in the HDR. So I can go back, and I'll set that to 0 value. Now the reason for this is that
sorry, Martin, just one question we've had come in quickly. Sorry to cut you mid-flow. We just had a question about the HDR images. Can we create our own and import into our project?
You can create HDRs, and if you have a look on the web, you can create them. It's quite a tricky way to create them with an SLR camera. You basically have to take lots of images and lots of exposures and then use software to stitch them together. Now that's the manual method for regular cameras. Now we've actually got a Spheron camera which captures the HDRs. Now Spheron cameras, you can look them up on the web, and you can see that they are actually available to buy as well, but you're talking about $30,000. So that may not be the ideal option to go, obviously depending on budget. But HDRs can be created, and particularly I think from Photoshop CS4 you can create HDRs in there as well. So that's just containing that information, but you can't create an HDR from a JPEG taken using a normal camera, because it's actually exposures and lighting information there. There are a number of free HDRs on the web there as well if you have a search for them. And the other alternative, and we've got a sample of these in Shaderlight, a company called Moof. These are creators of HDR images, and if you just look at moof.com, that these guys basically have a number of Spheron cameras, and their guys get to travel around the world taking these 360-degree images. So I would not recommend sending your CV to them at all to get a job. But this is what these guys do, and they've got hundreds and hundreds. So we've got different sunrise and dawns and sunlit lawns as well, in lighting environments. But
you should be able to find an HDR that supplies the type of lighting environment that you're looking for. And then, of course, once you've got your HDR in the background, you can then layer on top just a different background image, so you can use the lighting of a specific site or scene that you're trying to create your model on.
Okay, now the reason for, we've got a number of HDRs, and this, like this sunlit lawns in New Zealand here. Now these HDRs are actually creating the reflections as well. Now if I go back to our London morning, that we're going to get the correct reflections from that, and we've got the sun, and if I just have a look at the glass there, zooming into the glass, we can see the reflections of the buildings in the glass. And I can spin my model around there, and we can actually, see a little bit more of the environment that we're having a look around. Now, we don't expect that many people are going to be putting their model of their house in this particular area of London. Hey, why not? It's the most expensive real estate in the world, but that's part and parcel. But the reason we give you these HDRs are simply so that you can match a lighting feel of your particular environment. So although my background at the moment, I'm looking at lighting environment, I can also specify a custom image. And I can literally browse to a file. So just any file that you've taken using a digital camera, cell phone, and you can then place that into your environment as well. So, I've got a photo here that this was just from my cell phone, and we can put that into the background. Now, London morning doesn't entirely suit this one, so I'm going to go to my golf course because we've got the trees around the model. And the idea is to really match that lighting. So we can now get this positioned in sort of a location on this site, and I'm just going to brighten up my background a little bit there as well, because the idea, like I said, is to really match that lighting. So I could just turn the exposure down a little bit, and just turning down the exposure, we can actually see it doesn't re-render, so we can get that model to look how we want to, and all to do with the balancing. So if I just change my background brightness, there we go. So that's pretty close on, looking so that's matched with the background. So like I said, with the HDRs, yes, they've got interesting names with the golf course and London, but the idea is so that you've got a lighting environment that may match a photo that you take on your site. Now, one thing you can do, we've also got this position slider here for 360 degrees. We can actually rotate our background as well, so that the sun, if I look on the trees back here, the sun's sort of coming from behind, whereas mine's coming from the right. So I can spin my environment round. Now, this isn't going to change the background photo because that's ultimately just a fixed photo, but we can actually get the light to be the exact direction that we want to match that lighting perfectly. So, it's nice and easy to set up as well. So we've got that option there. Okay, so, we've got our sort of daytime scene here. Now, adding some components to it, working happily in the sort of the component library and the 3D warehouse here, you can just add in any components that you want to, and, we've got all these options here. Now, I'm going to show you a feature that we've got in Shaderlight, and it's called Replace Me. Now, the idea of Replace Me is that, you may have worked inside a SketchUp model, and the more you add, particularly something like trees, the more of those you add, SketchUp begins to slow down, and, things become a little bit of a struggle in your model. So what we've done is we've created a Replace Me feature, and this puts simple 2D geometry into SketchUp but renders them as 3D in Shaderlight. And I'm going to show you this, and what I would recommend is if you search the warehouse, and these are live on the 3D warehouse, and we just search for Shaderlight Library, and you'll see there we've created a Shaderlight library of components. So I'm going to go inside my library, and we've got some light fixtures in here, and I'm going to talk about those in a minute. But we've also got these replace me components. So if I go into here, we've got the classic sort of trees and people. So I'm going to select my trees here. And we can see, we've got sort of 25 different trees that we've just supplied here. And you can choose one of these trees. And I'm just going to choose this, this green ash here. And I can put this tree anywhere I want to in my model. So just temporarily, I'm going to stick it straight in the middle of my driveway. Okay, so we've got our tree there, and so if I look at that, we can see in my model here, it's a 2D face me component, but it actually renders as a full 3D model. So yeah, this we've got that feature in there, and what I can do is the scale that as well. So we've got that option there as well. Now what we're going to do, we're going to talk about replace me a little bit in more detail at the end of this webinar. So but we can see that tree there, and we can just bring that in. So what we can also do in replace me is actually create your own models as well. But like I said, we'll talk about that later. Okay.
I've got some exciting news from guys that haven't online. So.
Yes, and I wouldn't want to take that from you. So, okay, so, it's really good. Now, the real principle behind this and what makes this a little bit different is when you use a face me component and you use multiple ones of those, you set up a line of trees. So if we turn around here and say, well, actually I'd like another one of these trees along the side of my driveway. In SketchUp, your eyes are very clever. They can immediately see, well, hang on, that tree looks identical to that tree. Now, okay, I can scale this down a little bit as well, so I can make this tree look a bit different to that one. But it still looks the same. Now, with Face Me, it's going to look the same sort of from whichever direction. Now, this is why in our icon here, we've got this little arrow at the bottom. And what I can do is I can actually rotate my component. Now in SketchUp it makes no difference at all because we've just got the face me, but in Shaderlight we've actually rotated the tree, so it does look different from that actual angle. So you can then create lots of trees there, and they all look a little bit different. But so replace me is a powerful feature to use, and like I said, there are some a lot more you can do with that, but we're going to talk about that later. Okay, so I'm just going to remove that tree for the time being. Now, want to set this up for a nighttime environment. Now, nighttime environments are probably the trickiest things to render because it's just a little bit of understanding on what's actually going on. Now, the first thing we want to do is for the lighting environment. Now, there are nighttime HDRs. These are often on bright environments if you've got sort of like a lot of neon or lights, or I've worked with a couple of customers that they do sort of harbour work, and they had sort of a lot of harbour lights. But if you just want like a natural nighttime lighting, you can create a custom lighting environment. Now, what I've done to create this, I've got one here called Night Sky, and this is just 100 by 100 JPEG. And it's a couple of points of black. So if I put that as my environment lighting, this will now set my environment in dark blue surroundings. So there we go. So we've got dark blue surroundings. Now this has caused my background to be overexposed because this is a daytime background. So I'm also going to browse to just an evening sort of photo as well. So I can bring that in, and I just want to turn the brightness on that down a little bit as well, so we can really get our environment to be the correct lighting effect as well. Now maybe that's still a little bit too bright there, so what I can actually do is turn around and say that turn that down as well. So, we can really, get that to the exact level that you do want. So, we've got that dark blue option there. Now, ultimately, we've got our nighttime render. May want a different background. That one's not sort of entirely working there as well. So, we can just look at sort of different images. And the great thing about these is that, you just get these from the internet. So, I've got an image here just with these blue night clouds, and it's just a whole different feeling to the model and the environment there. So, just matching those, and, already we've got that nighttime feel to things. So, let's bring some lights in here. At the moment we've got our house with just no lights at the moment. So the first thing I'm going to do, if we come into our front room here, we've got our TV, and we can just see that we've got our TV image there. And if I have a look at this material in our SketchUp editor, this is just, again, an image straight from the web or your phone or anything like that. And we're happy to work with custom materials. So if I have a look in our Shaderlight material editor, I can see that this material has just got an automatic finish, which will just be like a matte finish. So, we've got sort of no problems on that. And what I can actually do is change that. I can say, well, I'd like that to be self-illuminating. And by setting that to self-illuminating, this material is then set so that it actually glows a little bit. So there we go. And I'm now going to set the brightness so that it is set to a monitor. There we go. So we can now see our material is actually glowing, and it's also reflecting in our glass there as well. Now, self-illuminating materials, they don't cast light in the scene. This is just an effect so that it looks like it's glowing. So I'm now going to have a look at our lighting editor here. And in our light editor, we can create multiple lights. And if I look in my list here, we've got point lights. So point lights are used for a light bulb, so it shines light in all directions. And we've got spotlights, IES lights, which again, we'll talk about. That's something we're going to look at in another webinar. Area lights and portals as well. So I'm going to look at an area light here. And an area light you simply set up as a rectangle of light. So we've got my area light, and I'm going to put on my TV here. Now I'm just going to move this slightly into my room, just so that, there we go, it's not sitting directly on the surface. And we can now see that we've got the glow from the TV onto the ceiling there. Now the good thing about this is I can simply set this up and say, well, actually I'd like it to be a little bit green as well. We're watching a nature program, so we'll just set that up so that it matches what's on the screen. So you can really fine-tune that. And now you can really get an idea about, SketchUp. This looks like SketchUp. These settings are the same as SketchUp there as well. And, if I did want this brighter or even slightly sort of darker, I can actually just control the brightness of that TV there as well. So I'm happy with that. So we've now got the TV on in the room down the bottom there. So, and we can see that hitting the water, and, so we've got all the reflections from that room. Now I can put other lights onto our building here, and, just to show you some of the different lights. Like I said, we've got, point light there as well, and spotlights. Now, a spotlight, if I just set up my spotlight, and I can say, well, actually, what I'll do, just set that back to being white. There we go. So this spotlight I can put on the corner of the building, and we can see that I can actually set that shining on different areas. So we've sort of got the searchlight if we want that. And the idea of spotlight, you've got the direction. So if I have that facing onto that wall there, sort of from that corner, we can also set this up so that we can control the brightness. So I can have a much brighter spotlight shining onto that wall. And also the spread as well, so I could turn that, much lower. So we've just got that spotlight there that's just literally showing up a tiny little spot on the wall. So you've got those full controls there. But what's a lot of, a lot of fun, and again, using sort of information that we've actually given you, if you go into the Shaderlight library, And we said in here we've also got the Shaderlight light fixtures. Now we've worked with Visa Lighting on these, and these are actually a real lighting manufacturer, and these are lights that you can buy. So any of these lights I can actually say, well, that particular light I want to put on that wall, so maybe sort of as a security light above my door there. And by bringing that component in, not only does that bring the material in, but it also brings the correct lighting information as well. And if I zoom in here to have a look at that light, we can see the light on the wall. It's set up, so this is how this light is going to look in real life. And this is using what's called an IES file. And I'm going to have a look at those in the next part. But this is what creates that pattern of light onto that wall. So you've really got that option there. So you've got the controls. And you can bring in those lights into your scene. So, we've really got that set up. So we've, we can have a look at that. Now I'm going to have a look at a bit more sort of lighting information. I'm just going to load up a different scene here. And, we can really start playing with lights, and on exteriors. But, interiors are sort of where the majority of the lighting, I guess, gets placed. So, I'm just going to render this environment here, in this kitchen. And what this kitchen, this has actually come from Igloo Studios, and so this is sort of a customer model that they've let us kindly use for the webinars. Now the good thing about this is, the first thing is to explain that the exterior lighting does matter. I've set this to that golf course evening again, so we're working on the same exterior as we were earlier. But I can also say, well, actually I'd like London morning. And we can see the feel of the lighting in the room changes completely. Now I can just turn the exposure down a little bit there, and we can see, we get the blue light rather than the green light from the golf course evening. So that is really important, using that lighting environment there as well. Now at the moment, the light is coming in and hitting the surface, and that's it, it's stopping. And we can really see this under, the counter in the middle here. So it's not bouncing around in here. And that's because of this setting that we have in our in render settings that's set to exterior. Now I can set this up, and I want to render this as an interior. Interior will then start to calculate what's called global illumination, which is what the GI in the bracket stands for here. This means that the light is now coming in the room and bounces round. So now we can really see it underneath that counter there. So we've got that lighting environment. So, straight away that we've got that set up there. And the only thing that I've actually done in this room is if I spin around and have a look at the window here, zoom in a little bit, there we go. I've put a light on my window here, and this particular light is called a skylight portal. And a skylight portal is like a one-way sign for light energy. So light is coming in the room, but it can't get out. So, that's what's causing the light in here. But again, we're going to talk about something at the end. If you want more information about sort of the skylight portals, really, we can help you out with those, and we're going to look at those in the future. Okay, now setting this to, again, a nighttime environment. Now I could put in my blue nighttime environment here as well. But what I'm going to do is, in my lighting, one of my lighting options here, I can say that I want artificial lights only in my scene. So this basically says only show artificial lights. So we've now turned off all our lights. And there we go, we can see my finished render. Now we can really truly see that we've got a photorealistic renderer, because that's what it looked like with no lights in at all. So, we have got that option there. So I'm going to start putting lights in my scene now. So the first light I'm going to put in is a light on sort of my countertop here, and I'm going to put in the spotlight that I said about earlier. A useful hint when you're putting in lights is, I would recommend, particularly for spotlight, drawing a little line underneath your light, because what that will do is that will really help place your light. When you're placing spotlights, the first click is the position, and the second click is the direction. So at the moment you can see my cursor is hovering over the back cupboard there. And that's where the light is facing. So we've now basically got a torchlight effect in the corner of the room. So by clicking on my line there, I can have my spotlight pointing downwards onto the countertop. So that's just going to update in a second, and we're going to see my light pointing on the counter. Now it's going to look quite bright at the moment, you know, just because that's the only light in the room. And, you know, so I'm just, the auto exposure, which is again something we mention later, is sort of compensating to brighten that up. Now I'm just changing the spread so we get the light a little more onto the countertop. There we go. Now with sort of lights bouncing around the room. So, you know, we've just got that effect there of the light. Now what we can also do is I'm going to put some lights in the ceiling, and we can see that in the model here we've already got these downlighters, so sort of the halogen downlighters in the ceiling. Now another hint when working with lights, components can save you a lot of time. And the reason is that, you know, in this kitchen we've got sort of 12 or 15 of these downlighters. And if you put a light in each one and then the customer says, well, actually I'd like a different color or a different style, you've then got to go through each one and change them. Whereas if you're working inside components, and there we go, so I'm just editing this component, you can place a light in one component and it's going to appear in all the others as well. Now in this particular one, I mentioned earlier about IES lights, and an IES light is like a virtual file, a virtual light in a file. So I'm going to put one of these IES lights in my component here, and we can actually see, there we go, I can see on this component next to it that I actually missed my line, which is what I was saying about earlier. So just going to zoom in here and make sure I do pick up on that line. So there we go. So I've now got this file pointing downwards. And an IES file comes from a manufacturer. So if you go to a manufacturer such as Philips or Saucony or General Electric and search for IES, now if you go into Philips and search Google and search Philips IES, you will find their website where they're giving you these files free of charge. And the reason they give you these files free of charge is they want you using their lights. And these lights contain the real life lighting information from the manufacturer. So I've just created this light in my component here, and I'm just going to wait for SketchUp to finish editing my component, and then Shaderlight's going to place all of these lights in. So, you know, we're just waiting sort of a bit of catch up on that to finish sort of editing those. There we go. So we've now got all of those lights on in the room. So if I can go back to my previous view, and you know we're going to be able to see our room with all the lights on there as well. So again, just a second or two to update, but we'll really see that going on. There we go. So you know that's updating. The global illumination is bouncing the light round. And now I can just turn that down a little bit, and again to get that you know, real look of what I want. Now something that's just missing at the moment is the lights from my downlighters on the ceiling, and if I just move my scene just a little bit, you know, they're not glowing. So again, we did this earlier, so I'm just going to go into my material editor here and pick the light, the material that's on that. And I can actually go into my material settings, and then I can actually say, well, you know, I'd like that to be self-illuminating, and you know, I can then control the brightness of that light, so I can really set that up to be sort of the brightness of you know, monitor or something like that. So you know, it's going to get that material glowing. It's just that effect to make the lights look like they're on in the ceiling. Now it looks like I've actually picked different material there. That's my mistake completely, and I've now got sort of a glowing outside my door there. So if I just, yep, I just picked slightly the wrong material. So, but that's, you know, that's fine. I'm not worried about fixing that just at the moment. So that material there, self-illuminating, and you know, we can just set the brightness up for what we need it to be. So when you want to use custom materials as well, as we saw with the TV, we're quite happy working with custom materials. So like the tiles on the wall here, we can actually see these are just from a file. So these are a particular manufacturer's tile. But you can download any particular tile that you want to, or any particular texture. And a useful website is cgtextures.com. And these give you a number of textures that can be tiled. So I can set this up here. So you can put in any materials that you want to. So we have got that option there. Now, one thing that we can do, rendering this, it's going to take a few minutes for this to render on my computer. So I'm just going to quickly talk about the cloud rendering. And we've got this icon here in the latest version of Shaderlight. So if you don't see the cloud icon, keep an eye out and have a look for that. And what we can do is we can actually send our model to render to the cloud. So, this takes the rendering off of your model. And you can set up the settings here and start that rendering, and it will export all the information it needs. And it will basically then render this for you on the cloud. And you can shut down your computer. You can send multiple scenes to it as well. So, you've got multiple files there, and we can see some of them are rendered. But what I'm going to do, I know we've just sort of looking at about time now. So I've thrown an awful lot at you. So there's a chance for sort of a couple of questions. While the questions are coming in, I can pass back to Patrick, and we can run through some of those some of the things we were talking about there.
That's great, Martin. Guys, that's about it from us. Thanks so much for attending. We really appreciate it, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks a lot.